Building a family can be a complicated, messy, lonely, and sometimes heartbreaking process. But you don't have to navigate this challenging journey alone.
Welcome to the All Paths podcast, where we support and celebrate all of the different ways there are to try to grow your family. We are your hosts, Kate and Emily from the nonprofit organization All Paths Family Building. And today we're talking with Dr. Fallon Durant about her journey. Fallon, thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly a dream to be here. You guys helped me so much through my own journey, and to be able to give back and connect with other people just like me means the absolute world. I'm just so happy to be here.
Well, that's awesome. We are truly so happy to have you as well. So, before we get into talking about your own family building journey in more detail, we'd love for you to briefly introduce yourself to our listeners.
Absolutely. So I currently work at Boston IVF. I am a laboratory supervisor in the embryology lab. I first started my whole journey as a graduate student, actually. I was in a PhD program at Tufts University, and I was studying molecular cell biology and development. And just because I've always been a super passionate scientist, ever since I was a little kid, I was making worm farms and doing leaf rubbings and learning everything that I could about biology. So, of course, it made sense for me to make it my future career path. And I decided to dive right into research and understand development and regeneration from a very fundamental level. And while I was doing this, I was trying to build a family with my beloved husband. And unfortunately, as we got going, we started having pregnancy losses. And we had one, and then two, and then three. And I got my PhD at that point in time. I moved on to do a postdoc, an academic postdoc at Harvard University. And during my time there, I was like, you know what? I have to move my research in a direction where I can help people. I need to be able to dive into fertility, find a way that I can put my experience to use and do something that's going to have a positive impact on other people who are going through the same thing. And I was studying regeneration at the time. Moreover, I was trying to understand the way that regenerative animals are able to combat fibrosis or scarring. And that has implications in the fertility field. Endometriosis is a disease, a fibrotic disease, and there are also other uterine scarring problems that cause infertility and issues in that department. So I was working with physicians at Beth Israel and trying to find a way that I could sway my research in the direction of fertility science. And while I was doing all of this, we had loss 4, we had loss 5. And at that point, I decided I really need to get into the clinic. I'm there already trying to receive my own fertility treatment. And I was like, I need to work there. I need to be in it. I need to be in the lab helping patients day to day. And when I was actually pregnant with my now oldest daughter, and I reached out to my physician at the time and I said, "Can you introduce me to the lab director of the clinic? I just want to have a conversation with him about, his job, and he has a PhD, so I want to be able to apply my PhD to the fertility lab environment." And he introduced me to the lab director, and I had a conversation with him. I was 30 weeks pregnant, and he basically, we did an interview, and sure enough, I ended up with a job. And now I'm an embryology lab supervisor. I help train the embryologists. I do embryology work myself. While I was in the clinic, I ended up cycling a number of times. We had some losses in between. And then I ended up with my second daughter in 2024. So I've really been through both sides of the spectrum. I have experienced a really long 7-year journey myself. trying to get my children. And I know that I ultimately ended up with my kids now, but there was a long time in there where we really thought that it wasn't going to happen for us. And we were even told by physicians at one point in time that it just really wasn't in the cards for us. Um, but I mean, that just continued to drive me forward and continued to inspire me to take my own experience and bring it into the clinic myself, bring my technical skills into the clinic myself, and be able to give them as a gift to other people. Um, it has been such a true pleasure to be able to work on fertility in real time for real people. I wish I could explain in words what it means, because every time I sit down at the scope, I have this amazing opportunity to soak in exactly what I'm doing. One of the best examples I have is we do ICSI, so we take individual eggs and we inject individual sperm into the egg. We have to do it one by one. And every time I sit down at the scope and I have my egg in my holding using my micro manipulators, and I have my sperm in my injection needle, I say this little mantra every time. I say, "You are so loved. You are so wanted. You are brave. You are strong. And your parents are fighting for you. So meet me halfway, fight for them too, and we'll make magic happen." And I inject. And
Oh, that is the best thing ever. That's
I
what you
know.
want as the patient on the other side. Like you want to know that the team, for them, it's not just a job. They really understand that like this is your whole future that they're holding in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. We
Yeah.
understand so deeply. And it's so hard too, because I think so. Embryology is this place where we're kind of the unseen warriors in the background. And yet we are the beating heart of the clinic, because everything that the whole product of IVF is made there. And we all understand the weight of that. And this is why I love being a lab supervisor too, because I have this beautiful opportunity to every single junior that I sit down with, I can explain my story and I can explain what this means to someone and share the profound impact of what we're doing with other people, because not everybody in the lab has gone through this themselves, but every single person in the lab has the empathy and understanding that what we're doing changes lives, makes dreams come true, is many people's only chance to have a child. And it just feels like such a an amazing opportunity, so life fulfilling and important for me to be doing. And I just want more than anything. I want patients to know that even though they don't really talk to us that much, even though they may not see our faces, this is what's going on in the background. It's never, oh, you're just another number. It's, we are looking at your case and taking your eggs one by one and taking your embryos one by one and acknowledging that this is an important and revered and well-loved chance for them to have their dreams come true. And I wish I could meet every single one of my patients. I wish I could talk to them all. I've made some connections, through transfers or retrievals or in places where we meet face to face, and I cherish those moments so much. But I wish I could tell more, just like how loved everyone is. This is a great opportunity for me here to be able to share that. And I hope they feel it. I hope somehow they know through the positive vibes and all the love and care that's coming from all of us, just how important we feel that this is too.
That is so wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I love that people are going to hear that. And honestly, I mean, it's like we always say, like, we don't wish this experience on anyone of struggling to grow your family or, suffering through losses, all of it. We don't obviously wish anyone was going through it. But it is very special to have someone like you in your role who has gone through it, because it is then even more personal. Your commitment to it is even more driven by your personal experience as well. But I have to say, through our like collaboration and through us being part of like the New England Fertility Society, we've had like the pleasure and honor of getting to know so many embryologists. And I feel like so many of them have your spirit without necessarily going through the personal experience themselves. So I really think, again, everything you said to me feels so, so special. And I know it's so personal, but I also think you're not the exception. I think the rule,
No.
like in my experience, every embryologist I have met has had that real strong sense of what their role in this is, and such a deep commitment to doing it well and loving the outcome. And professionally, I've gotten to know the embryologists that I believe were looking after my embryos, and so I always tell them, I was like, you were their first guardian, and like you, they're always like, we love to hear that, and in reality, we're not sure that they actually oversaw my embryos, but they were at the center at that time. And so we always joke that they were, and so they always ask, like, how's my embryo doing? I'm
No.
like, she's great.
She's
She's
grown up
great.
now.
Yeah, yeah. It's like she's doing great. Thanks to you, so yeah, I love everything that you just said about that. And but I am so sorry that you and your beloved husband went through so many losses. It's so hard, obviously. Any loss can be so, so challenging, but recurrent loss is its own particular hell, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm curious what your experience was. Did anyone give you any kind of sense or understanding of why it was happening? And presuming that they didn't, because we hear often that you don't get answers around this,
Hmm.
around recurrent loss, that must have been particularly frustrating as a scientist to
100%. It was, I became my own case study, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I mean, this is ultimately why I ended up in the clinic in the end anyway, because I just became, and I think every fertility patient goes through this when they have an unexplained diagnosis. They want to know everything that they can. And I had access to every piece of literature that I could get my hands on because I was an academic. So I was at Harvard. So I, of course, had access to everything at my fingertips. And I knew how to read science. I knew how to sift through what was real and what was, could have been better, could have been better science. And I was finding that I was making my own hypotheses. And obviously, I'm not a physician, so I couldn't truly diagnose myself. But it was a lot of real scientific discussion with a number of different physicians who ultimately made my case work out in the way that it did. And I have a pretty extensive and lengthy medical history. I have some pretty rare autoimmune diseases. I have something called Guillain-Barré syndrome. So my white blood cells will attack the myelin sheath that surrounds my nerves. So I've been paralyzed a number of times due to my immune system just making bad decisions about what to attack in my body. And I, of course, with one autoimmune disease, there are others. So it was certainly a consideration that my immune system played a role in what was happening. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of research out there that has been done to support recurrent pregnancy loss and an autoimmune cause of that. However, we do know that the immune system plays a massive role in regulating pregnancy because ultimately you have a set of cells, a rapidly dividing cell population, if you have a pregnancy, that is part you and part foreign. And it can be, if you have a dysregulated immune system, the theory is, well, maybe your immune system is targeting this as cancer because it's a replicating cell population that looks like yourself. Or maybe your immune system is targeting an embryo because it's just designating it as foreign. And we know that the immune system, and it's been heavily documented that the immune system has to develop some sort of tolerance to an embryo that's growing there during a pregnancy. So even though we don't know so much about anything really about recurrent pregnancy loss being caused by the immune system, other than a few very specific ways that have been determined, we had to go into the experimental route for me. So I received a very detailed and patient-specific treatment for my case that was managed by a number of different people. And a lot of it was, kind of throwing the kitchen sink at a problem because we just didn't know what was going to work and what was not going to work. And we didn't really have the science to back it up, but it was really our only option. I mean, at the end of Loss 5, my physician at the time and I sat down and he flat out said to me, "It's like, you're not going to be able to carry a pregnancy. It's not going to happen for you. You're going to need to use a gestational carrier. I can't help you any further at this point." And
Wow.
I actually, I mean, and it's a tough statement to hear.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, and even now, even though it did end up working out at the end, I can't be angry or upset with my physician coming to that conclusion because using the best of his knowledge and the best of his science and the best of his understanding, he did everything that he could do for me. And I think that it's important for patients to realize that too, is that their physicians are not working against them. And at any point, when their case is very challenging, the options become more limited, the science becomes more limited, and they are doing the absolute best that they can with the knowledge base that they have. They are never going to stop short of trying to give you a baby. And I still believe firmly to this day that he was really trying to give me the best chance that I had of having a baby, and maybe even still was the best chance of me having a baby, which was using a gestational carrier. Ultimately, we did experimental treatments. I saw a few other physicians, and we did things a little bit differently. And it did result in the birth of my first daughter. But keep in mind, too, that even after I had the birth of my first daughter and we thought that we figured out the problem, we still had two more losses after her doing the same exact thing. And so it took more effort, more work, more tweaking, more experiments, more throwing the kitchen sink against the wall for me to get my second daughter. And I I really thought that my family would look different. I thought, I know that we're done having children now. And I really thought and hoped that we would have more. But ultimately, this is the way that the cookie crumbled, and I'm so lucky to have what I have. And it's I get emotional every day. I see my daughters and I get emotional every day. I don't know how they are here. And I even think that my physicians feel that way too, because, we took a chance and we tried things that people don't ordinarily try and treatments that are expensive and difficult to access and were very personalized to my case. But they made it. And I didn't give up hope, and we were in a mental place to keep going. So we did, and we were ready to not continue going too. I think, after that fifth loss, and when we were trying these experimental treatments for the first time, my husband and I sat down. We said, we'll try this once. And if it works, then great. And if it doesn't, then we're going to go a different direction. We're going to start, looking into using a gestational carrier. And, there were some discussions with family members about, them potentially caring for us, which was a tremendous gift that they would be willing to think about. But it ended up working out, and now my daughter's here. So I'm very, very blessed. I'm very thankful for science. I'm thankful for physicians who kept an open mind and would listen to me going crazy about how I really thought that it was my immune system. But I mean, that's where the scientist enters the room and looks to collaborate with the people who know the medicine. And I was lucky that I was heard.
That's really wonderful that you had such a collaborative relationship with your care team. So you, I mean, you have a leg up on a lot of people going through this process, being a scientist in this space. But if you kind of removed the lab coat for a bit, how was your experience like just as a patient from the emotional standpoint, the mental health standpoint? I know you talked a little bit about conversations that you had with your husband about like, okay, are we nearing our stopping point? Are we at our stopping point? What was that experience like? Where did you find support for the kind of non-scientific side of things?
I have chills just thinking about it because I think anyone who goes through a fertility journey has this remarkable story of moving through unfathomable grief. And I, those 7 years where I was trying to create my family were just the hardest, most grueling years of my life. And I was obviously, professionally, I was working so hard too. So, I'm climbing the ivory tower and like trying to do a full postdoc at Harvard or like working towards getting my PhD when a lot of this was happening. And it was just, I had to be so dedicated to my career to get through what I was going through there while simultaneously trying to move through the worst pain of my life. And I think, everyone has their own struggles and I can't imagine, what other struggles I'll go through in my life, but I can say with almost 100% certainty that this going through all of that is going to be one of the hardest things that I will ever have to go through in my life and changed me fundamentally as a human being. There were some days I remember like little things that stick out in my brain, like just driving to work and just like gripping onto my steering wheel and screaming in my car, just like because I was alone and no one else was around. So I could just let my emotions out. And I was so frustrated and angry with my body. I, that it just, it would, I couldn't even contain it. It physically had to pour out of me at random moments. And I found myself, I couldn't keep it in. So I was very open and honest about my journey on social media. I told everybody that I was having pregnancy losses because I was so tired, particularly with recurrent pregnancy loss. It is so taboo. Nobody talks about it. And I feel like, and all of infertility is like that, but I think recurrent pregnancy loss itself is an extra niche um, part of fertility challenge that is less represented. So I was, reading books or like watching TV, and like maybe someone would have one loss, or, you would see someone represented who was going through infertility, but I never saw my case. I never saw myself and anybody else. Like, who else is just having repeat losses at 7 weeks? Like, it seemed so unfair that, I would go and I would see a heartbeat. And that's supposed to be the time where you celebrate and you're like, yay, we're having a baby. But I would see a heartbeat and I'm like, okay, it's going to stop in a week. Great. And to know that and like to be prepared for that all the time and like to not be able to celebrate pregnancies with my husband, and like for us to be looking at a pregnancy test and thinking like, okay, this is going to be a loss. Like it just felt so, I still feel like I was robbed of something. And this is, even though my family's complete, I have everything that I've ever dreamed of, I still feel like I missed out on something that other people get to experience, where they're able to look at a pregnancy test and celebrate with their partner or celebrate themselves if they're single and be like, yes, like I'm having a baby. I was never able to do that. Other than the first time. And the first time ended so quickly that, that felt like a huge rug pulled out from underneath me itself. So it took away of, even that joy that I felt the first time. But I think I was lucky to have a lot of people who supported me. I learned a lot about who couldn't support me, and I don't judge those who don't know how to support properly. I think that it's a lot to ask of somebody to understand something so big and so powerful and so all-consuming. But I definitely leaned into who I could trust a lot. And I found ways. I found ways that I could love my body too. I think that that was really important for me. I was teaching yoga at the time, as if I didn't have enough to do. I got really, really into teaching yoga. So I would come up with the sequences that I would teach in class, and then I would write these little like fables, these little short stories about, like whatever I was going through at that point in time. So let's say like I was waiting for my next cycle. And so I was going to theme my class to patience. I would write a little short story about patience, and I would theme my entire class to patience. So it was this nice little hour-long meditation for me where I could be focusing on this positive affirmation and bring it to other people. And then at the end of class, I would tell people what I was going through. And I would say, I just had my fourth pregnancy loss, and I am really working hard on learning to wait. And it's really hard to sit in this space and find peace and calm in my body when all I want is to be able to move forward and find out what the end of this journey looks like. And I was just really open, and I met lifelong friends that way. I met a bunch of people who were going through their own fertility challenges. I met a number of people who were going through recurrent pregnancy loss, and different walks of life, where people were moving on to using a gestational carrier, where people, had moved on and decided not to continue, and then other people who continued on and had success. And I was so grateful to have them. And then also, I decided that since I couldn't do this very simple thing with my body, growing a baby in my body, which seemed like everybody else in the world was able to do, and I wasn't. I was like, what can I make my body do that no one else can? So I actually did a lot of recreational circus. So a big shout out
That's so
to,
cool.
I know, a big shout out to Esh Circus Arts in Somerville, Mass.
Yeah.
Um, they are, it's this incredible little community. They welcome all bodies, all levels, all people into their space, and they teach anyone who wants to learn circus. So I got really into handstands. I got really into aerial rope. I actually did a performance before I had my daughter. So this is after Loss 5. I did a full performance at the student show that they conduct twice a year. And I made it all about my losses, and I put it all out there. And I did an entire sequence where I had a voice recording that was I asked a bunch of different people in the loss community to record their voices saying things that people had said to them that were hurtful. So, things like just adopt. Everything happens for a reason. You must be eating too much. You must be too stressed. All of those things that a lot of people who experience infertility hear. I had all of these lost parents record these sayings, and then my entire act on the rope was my reaction to that and how I felt hearing those things, and then me choosing, in spite of all of that, to continue to fight and to continue to hope and to continue to dream of having these babies, even though it wasn't working out in my body. So it was this beautiful way to feel like my body could do something that nobody else could do, even though I can't have a baby. And also be able to share through art everything that I was feeling. And I get emotional just thinking about it, because to be able to have the kind of people around you to support you through doing something that big and that expressive is massive. And I'm just so grateful that I had the space to be able to do that and have the people who were understanding enough to just sit there and hold space for me while I did that. Like I I think that's what got me my daughter ultimately. Like, forget the treatments and everything else. It was having the people who opened up space for me to grieve. And I think that's what let my daughter in.
Well, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you found that community around you to help you through, all of the difficult moments. Like I said, you had kind of the science piece you kind of had down, which is usually where a lot of
Right.
people stumble, but you had both sides, the scientific understanding of what was going on and the emotional support, which is really, really lovely.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it also,
totally.
I can tell it was so empowering to do something, well, powerful with your body when this other very fundamental piece of humanity really wasn't working
Yeah.
for you, unfortunately, through no fault of your own, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
and I mean, maybe you do know about them now, and but I wanted to make sure you know that there is a recurrent pregnancy loss association now. I don't know if there was then, but they are wonderful. It was started by a couple who went through recurrent loss. They are now parenting, but they are very interested in the scientific research part of recurrent pregnancy loss. And we'll
Yeah, that's
share them
awesome
as a
that
resource in
exists.
the notes of this episode also. They do have support groups and things like that, which are wonderful, but they're really into the research. Exactly what we were talking about is just that sort of like, oh, we don't know why this is happening, is like, that
Yeah.
is not a sufficient response. And
Right.
what can we do to give people, a better response to that?
Totally. I wish there was more science out there, and I hope there will be one
Mhm.
day. I think now there's a bigger drive to figure it out. And
Yeah.
I really am hopeful that there will be more treatments available, because it's so prevalent. I think like that's
Right.
that's that's the thing about recurrent loss, is that you hear the 1% a lot, like it's 1 in 100 people experience recurrent pregnancy loss, and you're like, oh, I'm this like tiny little fraction of people, but like that's so many.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
not like
so many.
that would not be classified as like a rare disease. That
Right.
is common, actually.
It's
Yeah,
prevalent. And
right.
Hmm.
I think it took me coming here to the clinic for me to recognize just how many people go through it. And mind you, I am a scientist. I've always been a scientist. And I was digging through the literature, and like I saw the statistics, but I did not fully comprehend until I was in the fertility clinic. And I'm looking at charts all day, and it's recurrent pregnancy loss, recurrent pregnancy loss, recurrent pregnancy loss. I'm like, oh, I never was alone. It's right
Mhm.
here.
Right.
And I mean, it's isolating. It feels
Absolutely.
isolating, but that's awesome that there's this community out there that's trying to make people feel less alone. I mean, like I said with, the circus thing, um, it, I think that is what brings success: finding community, finding peace,
Hmm.
finding, not that that can solve everything. Obviously, there's a big
Right.
medicine piece, but there's also the fact that you have to be able to keep going. You
Right.
have to keep slogging through the grief in order for the medicine piece to continue. And that's why it's so important, because there's there's no way to keep going trying to do it alone. It's just too dark, it's too dense, it's too heavy. And it's just so important to find the people to lift you up and find the levity in it all so that you can get through all of the hard stuff. And because otherwise, you'll have to stop. It's
Yeah.
just too hard to keep going. And I'm just so happy that there are people out there who want to be that levity, who want to be that buoyancy, who want to remind people that, you don't have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously, I think, all are welcome in our support groups. And of course, we do have pregnancy loss support groups, and they are open to someone who has gone through one loss or five losses or seven losses. And we're really honored to provide that. But also, I agree with you. I'm happy there is a specific place. We want people to find their people. If it's with us,
Mhm.
that's great. If it's not, or if the table can be even bigger and they can find additional resources that are really tailored to what they need, we absolutely love that. And another big thing, I mean, I know you know this, Fallon, but I always like to tell people, like, sometimes people will ask us, like, is all paths for us? They'll say, like, I don't have trouble conceiving, I have losses. Is Am I, like, welcome at all paths? And I mean, basically our answer almost that question anytime is yes. But
Mhm.
certainly in the case of loss, we always tell people we are specifically not only about infertility, we're about anyone that just the road to growing their family is different, harder, longer, more difficult than they expected. So you're just giving me a chance to say that again, just for anyone listening that maybe doesn't know that, is that everyone has a place here.
Absolutely.
Now, I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't ask you for the inside scoop. Now, one thing that people question a lot, whether they are, I don't even know how to say this. What's the deal with embryo grading? There's people
Yeah.
on one hand will be really excited, and then they're like, how did this not work? My embryo is so highly graded. And then you have the flip side where my kids were the worst graded embryos they'd ever seen, but somehow they're here. So I don't know. So that's a huge question that comes up in our conversations with people who are currently doing IVF all the time, is like, what exactly is embryo grading? How does this work? What's the
Yes.
actual logic behind it? Because sometimes it seems like something that, should be almost a guarantee isn't. And then something that should be almost a guaranteed failure is a success. So what's the process that goes into that?
That is an amazing question. I'm so glad you asked that. I also have a poorly graded embryo who's an exceptional person. I always say bad embryo, great person.
Yeah. So I actually feel so bad for patients sometimes because I feel like a lot of patients get so caught up in what the grades are. And the fact of the matter is, whether you have a 6AA or you have a 3cc, it's not going to be a guarantee that one will become a baby over another. Um, it is purely a beauty contest. So it is the way the embryologist is determining how the embryo looks and whether we think, based on the way that the cells appear, whether it's going to be able to survive the trauma of being transferred, of being sometimes frozen or biopsied or thawed. There's a lot of considerations to keep in mind of what this embryo needs to go through. And we have a number of guidelines that help us determine what those grades are going to be. Typically, the scale that we follow at Boston IVF anyway is the first number that the embryo has is going to tell you the expansion of the embryo, or basically how big the embryo is. You might have heard of something called hatching. So that's when the cells expand so much that they break through the zona pellucida, which is the outer eggshell, so to speak, that the egg has in the beginning. And that just gives us an idea of how the embryo is progressing over time. Then we have a grade. The first letter in the grade is the grade for the inner cell mass. That's the part of the embryo that ultimately becomes the baby. And some of the things that we're looking for there are that the cells are compacting down. So they're all dividing rapidly and merging together into one big ball. So sometimes if they're more loosely gathered or they're more spread apart, then they may not get as high of a letter grade. Then the last letter in the grade of the embryo is for the trophectoderm. So these are the cells that are ultimately going to give rise to the placenta if it's implanted and begins growing in the uterus. And the way that we grade these are how many cells are there? Are they very uniform? Are they different sizes? Like, are all the cells different sizes from one another? Are they falling apart? Are some of them degrading? These are all things that we take into mind when we give that second letter grade. And all of that is to say, it's just giving the embryologist an idea of how this embryo is doing in culture. We have no idea how this embryo is going to behave in the uterus. So that's where the big question mark comes in. What's going to happen once you transfer this embryo? What kind of environment is it going to be in? What is it going to do after being frozen? So you're doing a frozen embryo transfer. These are all complex variables that we can make very few predictions about. And there are statistics and we can follow those. And higher graded embryos generally have higher rates of live birth and implantation, but it's not an end all be all. And we just are trying to do the best that we can so that we can create an order, a recommendation from the embryology lab, which embryos we think would be better for transfer, better suited for transfer than others. And also give, a fair recommendation for, which embryos probably aren't going to progress further. And, we do our best. All we're doing is looking at the way the embryo appears. So we don't know too much about what the embryo is doing per se, or what the embryo is going to do in the future. It's just one snapshot in time, and it's just another piece of information in a very complex process. So I wouldn't get too hung up about the grades. I see a lot of people getting very upset that they have 3 BBs, and I'm just like, no, that's actually a really, really nice embryo.
Yeah, I think it is a
It's
major stress point for a lot of folks.
yeah, it's so tough because the number of AA embryos that we see on a daily basis is very small. And I think one thing that I like to say and I like to remind people about is that the fertility clinic also wants you to succeed. And there's a reason why the general recommendation is to transfer and this is just for day 5 through 7 that we're talking about here. We're not talking about day 3 embryos, which are cellular, but we like to say 3 BB or better because those are excellent embryos. And those are going to provide the patient the highest rate, the clinic the highest rate, and it just gives the best chance of success that we see. And so I think people get really down and out sometimes because it's like, oh, 3 BB, it just made the cutoff. It must not be that good. And it's like, actually, like it made the cutoff because it is good. Like we try not to transfer embryos that are not great. And so, in some cases, we'll even offer exceptions for transferring lower graded embryos for patients who struggle to achieve that BB status. And usually this is after a number of challenges being in cycle that they offer this option. Because it can happen. It can still work. Those embryos can still work out. And it might be for that patient that once it's in the uterus, it's, full steam ahead, where it might be harder for that patient in culture to get to that place. So, everything is really, really individualized, and it's just hard to make any predictions just based on one little piece of the puzzle.
I think that's going to be really reassuring for a lot of our listeners.
I hope so.
So you have such a unique perspective as someone who's gone through your own journey and as someone who now is, in the lab every day helping folks grow their families. So I'm really excited to get your take on these two questions that we ask all of our guests. You can answer them in any order, so I'll let you know what both of them are up front. The first is, what is one thing you would say to someone who is just starting to grow their family?
Mhm.
And then the flip side is, what is one thing you wish people would stop saying when someone shares with them that they're struggling to build their family?
Certainly. So, one thing that I would say to someone starting their journey to build a family would be to find their own joy in the process. Because nobody knows what that process is going to look like. And sometimes that joy is going to be incredibly hard to access for some people in some situations. So, regardless of what the experience looks like, and regardless of what the journey looks like, the the best thing that you could possibly do for yourself is to find lightness, to find happiness. And it doesn't have to be in the actual process, it can be something different. It can be like circus in my case, or like me and my husband, we actually took off many winters to go skiing and snowboarding and just enjoy each other and enjoy the snow
Nice.
and enjoy being outside, because ultimately, I think that joy is what keeps you going. And I brought this up when we were talking about community a little bit or a little bit earlier, that you need to be able to have that lightness and that buoyancy in order to keep you floating above the grief and the trauma and the difficulties that you could potentially be facing. And I think that regardless of whether you're experiencing a success or regardless of whether you're going through something that is more difficult to deal with, that joy is only going to lift you up. And even though it might take some extra work in order to, to find that joy, latch onto the people who bring it to you and do what you can. And it might look different than if you were, everything was going completely smoothly, but so long as you find it somewhere, and even the smallest ways, that will help keep you going regardless of what you're going through. And I think ultimately that helps you through parenthood too, because parenthood also is not easy, and parenthood is also, you have to give up a lot of your freedoms and you have to learn a lot along the way. So bringing that joy into that environment too is important and helpful to get through the challenges of parenthood. So it's kind of like a practice run.
Yeah, I love that. But what about the second question?
Yeah, I did a rope act about this. There's a whole act about it. I and my answer to this question is a little bit complex, but I'm going to try to be as eloquent about it as I possibly can. When someone is sharing their fertility challenges with you, that is them offering up this incredible amount of vulnerability in insurmountable grief. And that's a very special thing because they're feeling all of this grief and all of this pain inside their body. And they're taking it and they're trusting you to hold on to a piece of it so that they can feel a little bit lighter inside. Unfortunately, grief, particularly insurmountable grief that comes with infertility or recurrent pregnancy loss or the following, makes people very uncomfortable. And I think people mean well by this, but they try to take that grief and they try to morph it in a few different ways. They either try to minimize it to make it smaller. So they'll say things like, oh, it was meant to be. Oh, this was part of a plan. Oh, you should just relax and let it happen. Or they try to fix it and make some sort of solution to make it just disappear. So they'll say, like, you should just adopt. You should try this different treatment that worked for so and so. Or they'll try to explain it or provide reason for it so that it feels less heavy. So they'll say things like, oh, you're not eating enough. Oh, you're eating too much. Oh, you're too stressed, things like that. So instead of coming up with all of those ways to alter the grief through words, I instead encourage people to just sit with it, because this vulnerable person is taking their grief, they're handing it over, and they're saying, please hold this for me so that I don't have to hold on to it in my body for any longer. And all they're asking for you is to take it and be like, I see this, I'm holding it for you, and I'm right here with you. And that's going to be the most profound thing that you can possibly do for someone. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to change it. They're not looking for you to fix anything or come up with the brand new solution. They have doctors to do that for them. They're just looking for you to sit in that space and just you're their trust person. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought it to you in the first place. They see something in you that makes them feel safe, and they just want you to sit and be safety for them.
That's so beautifully put. Thank you. And if you were comfortable sharing, would love to see the video of your performance that you
Yeah,
did.
absolutely.
Such a powerful, unique way of expressing all of the rage, the grief, all of the feelings that come up during this process.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share.
Thank you for everything that you do and for sharing your lovely family story with us today. I think this episode will be a really lovely window into the work that you do, and really, I hope, help our listeners realize that there's the humanity is still there, even though this is such a very clinical process, that love and compassion and hope is coming through in every step of the journey, not just the ones that they're involved in.
Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you'll join us next time for more family building stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at allpathsfb, or visit our website, allpathsfb.org, for more information about our work. All Paths Family Building is so grateful to the members of our circle of support who are vital to our ability to provide emotional support, education, and advocacy that is open to anyone struggling to grow their families. Today, we want to give a special thank you to our bronze sponsor, Boston IVF. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Please help spread the word so that anyone who is struggling to grow their family can join the conversation. It's an honor to walk with you on your family building journey.